And next up, we have Real-Time Starcommander Ground Assault, a strategy Gamelit novel, written by Tracy Gregory. It is 186 pages, $3.99. It's available on Kindle Unlimited. Here's the author's description. From gamer to battlefield, the war grows. Recruited from Earth and tasked to put his gaming skills to work commanding vast fleets of starships, Evan secured a victory considered impossible. Now the Hegemony is asking him to repeat the accomplishment before the deadly forces of the children consume their empire. While searching for a suspected enemy base, Evan discovered a secret the children are desperate to hide, one that will determine the entire course of the war. Victory will require winning in an entirely new theater of battle. With a new suite of units at his fingertips, the ground assault begins. So there you go. This is a special take on a novel. It's not lit RPG. There's no RPG progression, which I'm always sad to see because it's so easy to implement. It is very much strategy. So if you've ever played any like 4X star games, like space games, it has that kind of same kind of course idea of like spawning and creating various types of battleships or ships to fight the enemy, gathering resources to fuel that creation system, and it uses those kind of base building, resource gathering, unit production game mechanics, but it isn't necessarily RPG progression because there's no leveling. Instead, the power progression system relies on strategic use of mechanics to build space and land-based in this novel automated fighting units to defeat enemies. And as the story progresses, new units are unlocked as the main character's faction, the Hegemony, trusts him, or his crew scans new defeated enemy starships. So that's how he's unlocking new stuff, and that's how the author is kind of stringing along that kind of power progression unit stuff. This story here, because it does try to justify the use of those strategy game mechanics, there's a little story manipulation and kind of sci-fi justification of culturally, historically, why they exist in this universe, and one only this gigantic, hegemony uses it, but also the other side does too. And like in book one, it was enough justification for me where I was like, oh, okay, I get what the other's trying to do, and I'll go with it because it's a fun enough excuse to use these kind of game mechanics, and I'm cool with it. Except when it came to the ground battles this time, that was a little, I think the author just couldn't figure out a way of like justifying why both sides are using it. He does set it up, for the space stuff well. Both sides use them great to create these space battles where they're spawning spaceships and fighting each other in different strategic ways. Just like in book one, that was really well done. In book number two, there's the expansion into ground battles, and unfortunately, only the main character side is using these RTS mechanics to do the ground battles. The other side doesn't. So in some ways, if you've ever played an RTS game, you're like, okay, that's not uncommon that the other side is set up as the enemy. They have a fixed amount of stuff, and the main character is the one that's is setting up a base and spawning locations and gathering resources. So in that respect, that's very faithful. But for me, I would have liked to have seen both sides have the same advantages and disadvantages. It feels more fair that way, especially considering when the author has the characters practicing their grand battles, both sides have that advantage, and they're definitely being very strategic about how they're using their land-based systems versus their space-based systems, and how they're different and how different strategies are involved. And I would have enjoyed seeing that competitiveness and that strategic thinking expand into the actual real life in the story battles. And it just doesn't. And it's all justified fairly well enough why that isn't the case. But for me, it's just a slight disappointment on the game mechanics side of things. However, an improvement in book number two over book number one, in my opinion, was definitely the world building. There's a lot more of expansion of the enemy, their backstory, their history, the children of the hegemony, the antagonists in the story, and I like the fact that there are definitely sections where they're told from their perspective with their history, explaining in depth about their consistent and clear motivations, and just kind of this like twist in their culture to explain some of the quirks that make that faction interesting. Plus, there's a very clear lead into like the next foe into the story. If you ever play like StarCraft, you can probably guess what the next foe is going to be. Overall, it was an enjoyable story, but again, it loses a little bit on the game mechanic side for me, but it picks it up on expanding the world building, which is something I enjoyed. So for me, it still gets a score of like 7.5 out of 10, which is very much middle line good. Not particularly like really good, not particularly like, oh, barely good, but like just satisfying in the middle. But again, this is very much a specialty story. If you like RTS games, if you're a fan of those, you're going to enjoy this.